What I'm going to look at is open source information and conflict zones. And one thing that is often overlooked, but is actually quite important, is actually finding the sources in the first place. So I'm just going to quickly look at how you might find sources from YouTube, for example. So something that's very simple is you can simply look at what's being posted on Twitter, for example. What I often do is I'll look for a name, for example, Homs, also the name YouTube, and that'll just give me lots of results. I'm not actually that interested in the actual videos themselves, but the channels they've been posted on. So, for example, here, you've got a pretty good example of what is a channel that's used by the Syrian opposition. They've got their own logo designs, you know, it's quite well presented. And one thing you want to really look for with these channels to figure out if they're authentic or not is the logos that are being used on a lot of these videos, because a lot of these videos posted from an area like Syria has the same logos on them. So here, you'll see a channel, and here you might just be able to make some of the logos in the top left corner. If you actually notice with this channel, the logos are actually different. When you see this, when you're looking through channels for videos from Syria, what this actually suggests is that this isn't the original source of these videos. So you want to start actually searching for the original sources, because it's always best to have the original source whenever possible. Quite frequently, videos do get taken down from YouTube. Sometimes it's entire channels, and that can be hundreds, if not thousands, of videos. But when you're actually doing, you're trying to verify something, it is very important to find that original source, because there is additional information that can be linked with those videos, and that's very important to find. So here we've got quite a simple example. This is a video that showed people from Homs. It was actually fighters after they'd been agreed, truce had been agreed, and they were leaving. But I didn't think this was the original video. So what you can do then is you take the title of the video, quite simple. I mean, this is how you get the name out of the videos, and then you just put it into Google Translate. And then the great thing about Google Translate is when you have it translated into English, you can actually highlight each individual word, and it shows you the word in Arabic or whatever language it may be on the left-hand side, which means you can copy that, and then you can paste it into search for on YouTube. This is actually quite useful, because in some of these instances, these are really obscure place names that if you don't know Arabic, you aren't going to find them any other way. So this is a really good technique to actually find names in Arabic. So in this example, you can put in Homs, and here you can go through all the videos that have been posted on the day, the last hour, the last 24 hours, see which was the first video that was posted. So, this is quite a basic technique just to try and find the original videos. Another good way is actually finding the Facebook pages belong to the various groups in, whichever conflict zone you're looking at. Syria kind of, it's been going on for 3 years, so you kind of have quite a formalized way of this information getting out there. Everyone has Facebook pages, they all have their own YouTube channels, they all have their own Twitter accounts, so it's quite easy to do with Syria. So in this case, this is the coordinating Kafir Batna. They've got a YouTube video on there. It's always certainly going to be the original account, but again, you still need to double check stuff. So doing something quite simple like that, you can build up a whole list of videos. So this is the list I've got. There's, let's say, there are 1,000 channels I've subscribed to. And just by subscribing to them, I can look through them every day and see what's the latest stuff coming out of Syria. Very simple stuff. Anyone can do it. And I suggest you do it, because it's good. So what can you find out? Well, a good example is this video. This video actually shows, you can see it, it's quite dark, cluster submunitions. And this was the first sighting of cluster submunitions in the Syrian conflict. This was quite interesting because obviously cluster munitions are a big issue, and this led to a short Human Rights Watch report. And that was, when this first happened, I think it was back in July 2012, and it was just one incident. It was completely out of the blue, and there was no other attack. There was only like 2 videos after that showing cluster bombs. But that was until October 2012, where all of a sudden we started seeing lots and lots of videos appearing online. It was like someone had turned on a tap, and just all of a sudden there were no videos, and then the next day there was 8 videos, the day after that 10, just more and more videos. The thing is, Syria denied this. Syria said we aren't using cluster bombs. So what I started to do with Human Rights Watch is started collecting every single video I could find of cluster bombs in Syria. And what we did there, we took the video, we said what kind of cluster munition it was, we said where the cluster munition had been dropped, and any other relevant information. So Human Rights Watch could take that and actually produce a map showing all the locations of where cluster bombs had been dropped. So they created this map. So we could see there was all these videos coming from a large area, and people say, how do you verify these videos? But sometimes it's a matter of saying, you can see in this map, it's across the entire country. So unless there's a coordinated campaign to fake cluster bomb videos across the entirety of Syria, we can say that we don't have to go in and verify every single video individually. There's just so much information. You could do it, but there's quite a lot of information that does suggest they were using cluster bombs. But that wasn't really the end of the story for cluster munitions, because we then had this video posted this year showing a different kind of cluster weapon. When I first saw this, I didn't know what this was. I had no idea what this was. If any of you know my story, when I started this, I didn't have any background in the military or anything like this. I'm completely self-taught. So when something like this turns up, it's very exciting for me because it's something new to investigate. But I just started off not knowing what it was. But there is quite a lot of information there if you know what to look for. So first thing I did is put together this composite image of the remains of the rocket, just so I could get an idea of what I was looking at, just so I could use it for my own reference. And then what I did was something quite simple. I just went to Wikipedia and looked at the equipment of the Syrian army to start finding what was a likely suspect. I mean, it's all listed there. You can just go and have a look. So here we've got an example. They've listed all the multiple rocket launcher systems. It looked like a rocket, so I thought I'd check those out first. And then we've also got a list of all the tactical ballistic missiles. So one thing that was very important to find out what it was, because there's so many different kinds of missiles and rockets, is I wanted to know how wide it was. So you look at this picture, and you can see, the nose cone. You can see, part of what we assume is the rocket. But there's one thing in there we can actually use to measure the rocket. The guy's foot. If you take the guy's foot and lie it next to the rocket, you can get a good idea. You can see it's larger than his foot. But then, who knows how long is a person's foot? This is the next question I had. So I then went onto an online calculator and said, okay, if he's got it's really small foot, how long is it? It's going to be about 23 centimeters. If he's got quite a large foot, how long is it going to be? 27 centimeters. So going back to look at that, I can say, okay, his foot, we're looking at 24 to 27 centimeters. You can tell it's shorter than the rocket, but only by a small amount. So that rocket looks like it's going to be maybe 30 centimeters, around that amount. So then I started looking at the size of these rockets. So here we've got a list of different rockets. So on the left, we've got the Luna M, which has a diameter of 55 centimeters. So that's obviously far too large. We've got the Fata 110, which is 61 centimeters. Again, too huge. The BM27, this is 220 millimeters, 22 centimeters. That's too small. We're kind of doing a kind of Cinderella thing here. We're trying to find the slipper that fits this guy. So these all seemed wrong. Then I thought, well, what if they've actually got something we haven't seen before? So the BM27, we know they've got them. I was researching them, and they have cluster warheads. They have cluster munitions. And I thought, well, maybe there's a larger size that has a cluster munition. In fact, I looked up the BM30 Smirch. You can see on the profile on the right, it has a 300 millimeter diameter for its rocket. So I thought, okay, this could be possibly it. The problem was I started looking for reference material to match to the rocket. I could see, the rocket remains, they were in a terrible state, but I want to be able to match it perfectly. So I was looking all over YouTube and Google, and all I could get were these military references where you had pictures about that big that you couldn't really see the details. But there is one other resource that's very useful when you're looking for military equipment, and that's the holiday photographs of military nerds. So what we have here is someone who visited a military museum, and he took huge resolution photographs of BM30 Smirch missiles on display. I mean, these are like 4 by 3,000 pixels. They're absolutely huge. So I could zoom into every single detail on this picture, and I started going through the video and matching what I could see. So here you can see part of the rocket. That's from the guy's holiday snaps. That's from the video, and you can see, those square holes, the 2 bolt holes. They match what's there. This is the actual warhead. You can match those as well. The holes are all in the same position. Here's the complete warhead. So again, that's a strong match. We've also got, this is actually the container section for the cluster bomblet. So you can actually see this. You might not be able to make it out, but there's small little holes running along the side. I compared this to other missiles I had reference materials for example, the BM27's rockets, and it didn't match in any way. It did every single element started to match. Then we started getting other photographs. So this is a guy posing with the bottom section of the rocket. I mean, you can tell these things are absolutely massive. What someone did then, a fan of my blog, he actually put together these images. At the bottom, you can actually see a reference image from an arms manual. It was very low resolution, not very detailed, but basically reconstructed the remains of the rockets and laid it next to it, and laid it next to the photograph in the museum, just to compare them. And again, this kind of gives you a good visual clue that this is actually, what we're looking for. So, this is a good example how you can combine kind of open source information from, people's museum snaps, videos from Syria, Wikipedia, to actually discover this. And this is really interesting because no one actually knew the Syrian military had these weapons. It was a completely new thing. So just by a combination of open source information, we discovered something completely new. So now people are saying, when did the Russians give the Syrian military these weapons? Because no one knows when they did it. So it opens a whole can of worms for people to investigate. But it is just generates some very interesting information. What we're seeing here is another story I investigated for a long time. This is the first ever video I found of a barrel bomb being used. Anyone who follows Syria will know about barrel bombs. They're basically, in this example, you can see it's a sort of drum filled with explosives. They've thrown it out the back of a helicopter, and it's kind of like a big IED, basically. These people weren't really believing that. You had articles like Barrel Bomb Baloney. People weren't, taking it seriously. Why would a professional military throw IEDs out of the back of helicopters? So through open source information, we started actually identifying, the evidence that pointed towards it happening. So what we have here in this video is, if you watch the back of the helicopter, you'll see what happens next. You can just perhaps make out the bomb that's been thrown out the back. So that was the first video showing what looked like a barrel bomb being thrown out. But people were saying, oh, you can't see anything there. It's too blurry. You can't tell what that is. That could be anything. Fortunately, well, not so fortunately for the people who had the videos because they were killed, but the opposition managed to capture a guy who had mobile phone videos. And this was the mobile phone video. So he's in the back of a helicopter. He's lighting a barrel bomb with his cigarette and pushing it out the back of a helicopter. Of course, then people say, well, how do you prove that's Syria? That could be absolutely anywhere. Well, if you go to Google, and you'll notice there's this village on the ground below it. So you go to Google Maps, you start searching through the area, and you can actually find, on the right, that's Google Maps satellite imagery. On the left, that's the actual clip from the video. So you can find the exact town he was dropping that barrel bomb on, proving it was inside Syria. Later on, the Syrian opposition captured an airbase, and here we have a storage room inside the airbase where there's actual barrel bombs. At the same airbase, we also have this photograph, which shows a trolley system that's been installed in the back of a helicopter, apparently to help them throw barrel bombs out. And that was kind of the end of the story for the barrel bombs for a while, because it was sort of, we knew they were using them, we had the evidence they were doing it, and no one could really deny it. Then this year, things started to change with barrel bombs. So here's an example of what I mean. What you're seeing here is a new kind of barrel bomb. It's a lot larger than the other ones used before. All of these videos are actually taken from one location. They're being used very, very heavily. And they seemed a lot more effective. And if we see in this video, we can actually get a clear shot of a helicopter pushing one out the way. So if you just watch the back of it, you'll see that helicopter just drops a barrel bomb. What was really interesting about this, I managed to grab this screen grab from one of the videos. That actually gave a really good profile image. You can see 3 tail fins. You can see that, I don't know if you can make out on the right-hand side, there's like a little thing sticking out. I believe those are actually wheels they push them out on. You'll see more of that later. And then there's like a metal plate in front of it. Some of these didn't explode. Or play when they should. So here we've got a really good example of one that hasn't exploded. What you can actually see in the front is, you can see the tail fins on the back of it. There's 3 tail fins that have been smashed into the ground. The metal plate in the front is actually the fusing. What they've actually done is quite a clever fusing system for this improvised bomb. They've basically put a metal plate like that in front of the main section of the barrel bomb with the fusing wire in the middle of it, and put it there. So you've got a very large surface area for impacting, so it makes them far more effective and efficient. The tail fins are so they correct themselves when they're in flight, so they always land on the end. You can tell there they obviously haven't landed on the end very well. So you can get a good view here where they've got the double plate with the wire in the centre. So, I mean, there's tons of footage like this, and you can actually reconstruct the barrel bomb and figure out, okay, this is how they've manufactured them, this is why. And then you get pictures like this. This is a picture of a Hezbollah member who was killed in combat, and this is one of the pictures that was posted in memory of him. And this shows him in the back of a helicopter with 2 barrel bombs loaded in the rear of it. You can actually see they've created a special platform to put the barrel bombs out. On the bottom of the barrel bombs, you actually see wheels that have been. I'd seen them before in other videos, but this proves that they were wheels. And what's interesting, they have a very consistent design. Earlier barrel bombs were very all over the place. It was just like they're throwing stuff into a barrel and chucking it out a helicopter. But these had a very consistent design. So, and again, that kind of was the end of the story for a while. And then this video was posted online. This shows a barrel bomb attack, but this is a very different one because this was the first reported chlorine barrel bomb attack, which a couple of months ago there started being reports of chlorine being used in Syria. And from the videos we've collected, we can get a pretty good idea of how these are put together. So this is the chlorine cylinder with that which is inside it. They zoom in, you can actually see Cl2, just about see Cl2 marked on that cylinder, chlorine cylinder. So in this video, we're actually examining one that hasn't exploded. And from this you can actually start thinking, okay, how are these actually put together? How are these designed? You can just make out there's a metal bar that runs across the front of the bomb. As far as I can figure out, the point of that is to keep the end of the cylinder away from the ground. So when it hits the ground, it doesn't get buried and the gas can be released. There's also slots cut into the side of it to ensure the gas can be released. You'll see here they're digging out wire wrapped around the neck of the cylinder. That's deck cores. If that had exploded, it would just blown the end of the cylinder off. The problem is, if you stick a ton of explosive in there, it'll just burn up all the chlorine gas. It won't be effective. So what we're seeing here is not just them chucking a gas cylinder in a barrel bomb, they're designing these bombs specifically. And this is a good example here of what happens when one explodes. If you look at this, it's the end of one cylinder that has been blown clear off. It's not been a huge explosion, just enough to take the end off. And again, here we can see the metal bar that runs across the front of it. There's two large bolts halfway through it to keep the actual cylinder away. You can see the slot that's been cut into the side. So these are things that have been designed like this on purpose. Here's another example of this is a lower quality video, but there's another example where you can see the metal bar. So there's several examples where you can see this configuration. This is an interesting video because, again, this shows a barrel bomb that's being dropped on insurgents. The thing is, this isn't in Syria, this is in Iraq. This is the evidence of the Iraqi Air Force using improvised barrel bombs in Fallujah. And it was for a very short period, these bombs started appearing. I worked with Human Rights Watch, they produced a report. Apparently the US government contacted the Iraqi government and said, don't use barrel bombs, because obviously there's a bit of issue with them being used in Syria. And since then, there's been no reports of these kind of improvised barrel bombs being used. So it is possible to discover stuff that people actually take action on. So a story that I got quite well known for is the smuggling of Croatian weapons to the Syrian opposition. At the start of 2013, I'd spent about a year looking at all the videos coming from Syria. And there was one video that was, there was new videos coming in that shows something completely new, and I'll just show you what they were. So here we have a series of weapons that started appearing in like literally dozens of videos over a period of weeks. That's something that was completely new, I'd never seen it before, and I knew straight away there's definitely something going on. So we have all the weapons listed here. The M79 Ossa, the RBG-6, the M60 recordless gun, and the RPG-22. There wasn't that much information online about some of these weapons. The M79 Ossa, I found one reference image for. The M60 recordless gun, I found two reference images for. There was like nothing online about these because they were very unusual weapons. They were from the former Yugoslavia. The RBG-6, well, I'll come back to that. The RPG-22, that's a weapon from the Soviet Union, used by the Croatian military. So there's already 3 links to Croatia with these. The RBG-6 was a bit more complex because there's actually it's a copy of something called the Milkor MGL Mark I from South Africa. And the problem is they're virtually identical. So what I started doing is looking for reference images. So I just went to Google Images and started searching through until I could find out one where I could compare them. So here we've got both of them. They're virtually identical, but there are a couple of small differences. You can see on the RBG-6, on the handle, there's actually 2 bolts that aren't present on the Milkor MGL Mark I. And if what we were seeing was a Milkor MGL Mark I, then that sort of was not related to Croatia. If it was an RBG-6, they're actually manufactured in Croatia. So then you'd have 4 weapons all linked to the same country. So I basically started looking through videos from YouTube, and eventually I came across this video where they zoomed in on a guy holding it, and there were 2 bolts in the position they needed to be the RBG-6. So I did something quite basic, really. I created this spreadsheet. I just started putting every single video I found. I put a few key pieces of information, the date, what they were, the group who had them, the location, and what region it was in. Really basic information. But from that, I could start seeing a pattern. They were mainly coming into the south of the country. They were going to specific groups that were very closely tied to the Free Syrian Army. And pretty soon I had quite dozens and dozens of these videos. Usually if you see a new weapon in Syria, you'll see 1 or 2 videos and that's it. I collected about 150 in 2 weeks. It was insane. So I went to the New York Times and I said, I'll do a blog about it for your at-war blog. And I gave it to them and they didn't come back to me. I thought, oh, it can't have been that good then. But then they came back to me 2 weeks later and they said, actually, we're really interested in this and we've had people investigating it. And it ended up making 2 front-page stories. The first story is basically saying that they discovered by talking to government contacts and showing them the videos and saying, we've got these videos and they're all from Croatia. They said, oh, it's a fair cop. It's actually the Saudis. They've been buying them from Croatia, flying them to Jordan and smuggling them in. And they had all sorts of sources telling them all kinds of things. Not all of it made it to print, but this kind of, shows you how this information, this open source information can break big stories. More recently, we've seen something else. These pictures are from the official Twitter account of what was formerly known as the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, now known as the Islamic State. They were posting videos of them fighting the Iraqi army, doing quite a bit of damage, and they were posting this on Twitter. And they posted this picture, which was very, very interesting, because I could see that from this picture that this was actually an M79 Ossa. In fact, the M79 Ossa isn't a weapon that's spread widely in that region. It's a very unusual weapon. So there's really only one place it could have come from, that original weapon sent to the Syrian moderate opposition. So this was proof that it's spread all the way to Iraq into the hands of the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham. So another example is the same kind of weapon being used by another jihadist group, the Islamic Front. And there you can see, you can actually follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and they give English updates. Which is nice. Another weapon that started showing up was a Chinese HJ-8 anti-tank guided missile. So again, these were sent over supposedly only meant to be going to moderates. And again, we have the Islamic Front using them in March 25th, 2014. So already they'd spread beyond the original people. So another weapon that started turning up was the US TOW anti-tank guided missile. The initial reports in the media said this was only going to a group called the Hazam movement, which is basically set up specifically to be the moderate opposition. But what we actually started finding were videos from other moderate opposition groups receiving them. And in the end, it turned out there were 9 different moderate opposition groups receiving them rather than just one as claimed. And there was one very interesting video. This video is from one of the groups who received them. And they rather kindly show us all the markings on them, so you can get lots of interesting information out there. Someone's been very crafty and rubbed out the serial number, which is a key piece of information. Unfortunately, they didn't do a very good job, and you can just boost levels and the numbers just reappear. So from that, you can start doing investigations into where they were originally. I believe the last people who had these were the US Marines in 2012. So, this information, you can just, whenever I see a weapon in a video, the first thing I'm looking for is the markings. If there's a crate, I want to see the markings, because that's where the really tasty information is. The other kind of element to this is actually verification. So we looked at, kind of stories and, a few case studies of, stuff that's actually quite basic, really. But you want to look at verification. So this is from TG in Libya. This is in 2011. This is when the Libyan opposition said, we've captured this town. So you're watching this video, you can't really see much. There's a tank rolling down the street. There's a mosque. How do you prove this is TG? It's quite simple, really. So we've got a really great landmark here. We've got a mosque. If you're looking at these videos in the Middle East, you'll come to love mosques because they are great landmarks for figuring out where stuff is. We can also see the tank rolling down the street, so that's a pretty big street. It's not a back lane. So if I TG on the satellite map, we can zoom in and look at the road, and you can see the road's pretty wide. That's the main road. You can probably fit a tank down there quite easily. So you just start going along the road until you find a mosque. And you compare the mosque, you can see the dome on the right-hand side, the minaret on the left. You can say the actual cameraman is going to be standing to the east of the mosque, filming west. He then films the road, and you can also see the road curving around the wall in front of the mosque. So, this is really basic stuff to find, prove something is the location it's in. And you can keep watching that video and say, okay, there's a shop over there. Can I see that in the satellite map? You can just keep taking that as far as you want. Another pretty simple example of that kind of verification is from Brega, Libya. This was a bit different from that video because this is basically just a guy walking around a really nondescript town. I mean, it's a really boring place. All you have is these sort of 1-, 2-story buildings, walls everywhere. He's walking around the roads. And I was thinking, how can I verify this is true? Because at this point in the Libyan conflict, people were constantly saying, oh, the government controls Brega, the opposition controls Brega. And these guys were saying, we're in Brega, we control it. So the question is then, where are they? So I started thinking, okay, let's just find the area he could be in. So here, this is one residential area, lots of apartment buildings. It's clearly not the right location. Another residential area, this could be more likely. You can tell these buildings, because of the shadows they cast, you can tell they aren't very large. It depends on the time of day, obviously, but these look like 1 or 2 story buildings. And there's also another similar area where the roads are all curving. I thought, actually, he's walking around all these roads. He's looking up and down roads. Why don't I just draw the roads out? So I just drew the roads out. I saw okay, if he's in Brega, that road layout has to be somewhere. So I drew that road layout. I searched for it, and I managed to find this. And put them side by side, and you can see it's pretty much a perfect fit for what you can see there. And then what you can do is watch through the video again and say, okay, if he's at the start of the video, if he's here, I'll go through his sort of adventure with him, his walk through Brega. You can see all the areas. So for example, here, near the end of the video, he points the camera towards him, kind of a selfie shot, and he sees this kind of open yard behind him and these garages, and you can actually see on the right, that's the area he's actually looking at if you follow through the video. Another example that was more involved, this is something we worked with Storyful's Open Newsroom, where we had a lot of people contributing information. This was basically when the camps were being held. We were out in Egypt, and what you're seeing here is basically firing. A young woman in blue is filming this. She'll just come into shot in a second. So there she is. She's just filming it, and any second now she'll be shot off camera. So what we're actually seeing here is government soldiers shooting someone holding a camera. They're not armed. They're just filming what's going on. It's a very tight angle. There's not much information in there. Is there enough information to find out where it is? So what we have, we can see, okay, there's, on the left-hand side, we can see this little bit of a building. We don't know how big it is, we can't tell, but we can see it. The paint's peeling off. There's a little white sign on it as well. Then we can see 3 apartment buildings. They've got a very distinct pattern. So just to give you an example of how terrible you can be at art, I drew this out. This is a really rough sketch. I mean, I threw this together in 5 seconds, but I just want, usually you can use a piece of paper, you can use crayons, whatever you want, just as long as it gives you a visual idea of what's there. So this is very basic information. Bottom right corner, that's where the camera was, with the small corner. Then the 3 buildings, they've got very distinct, front of them is very distinct, so you want that because you can see it in satellite maps. On the far left, there's an antennae. So I started looking for it, and we were discussing this on the Open Newsroom, and someone, people were pointing to the area it could be. So, they point to this area, the mosque that they could be. So I started looking at the streets around it, seeing what is there. So here on the left, we've got one street where the problem here is the buildings are too far apart. You can tell in the video, in this satellite map imagery, the cars are about, these are each, a few cars length apart. In the video, you can tell they're very close together. On the right-hand side, you see one where there's a very, the midsection of the road has got a lot of trees in it. You can't see that in the video either. But then I came across this. And if you look on the left, those buildings look very interesting. And on the top left corner, there's a very small structure. So I put my terrible drawing next to it, and it sort of became, you can see how the kind of pattern of the buildings matches. You can see the same position for the little stone structure. So then you can start looking on a silent panoramio for people who've been taking photographs in the area. You don't have the advantage of having street view in that area, but you can see what pictures people have been taking. And this became very useful because then I could start searching through and looking at people's pictures. So I started looking through, and I started, this is an example of one picture. You just click into it, see what it looks like. And this guy had been taking a lot of pictures of road signs, or I don't know what he was taking pictures of, but it seemed to be the same kind of road signs in the area I was looking at. And eventually I found this image. You'll see there's a very small stone structure there. So I zoomed into it and had a look. If you actually look at the paint damage on it, it matches exactly to what's on that building. If you look at the position of the white sign, it matches exactly to what's on that building. As far as I can tell, this is the exact position the girl was shot at. So we were able to verify that using the imagery out there. I'm now going to take you through a case study. Just bear with me. This is the August 21st attacks, sound attacks in Damascus. On August 21st, I woke up and it was an ordinary day. I'd been up at 6 because my daughter hopped onto Twitter to see if anything was going on, and there was a huge amount of activity about a supposed sound attack. quite frequently in Syria, you'll hear rumours of chemical weapons attacks. You hear that all the time. You'll get like 1 or 2 videos if you're lucky. By the first hour, I'd collected about 97 videos. I'd shared it with journalists. There's a huge amount of footage coming out. We're showing victims, just terrible stuff. Eventually, I would, in the few days that followed, I would get about 200 videos from the attacks. That was completely unheard of. But what I was really interested in was the munition used. So what we're being shown here are local activists showing the munition that was used. And this was very, very unusual. No one had seen this stuff before. Here we've got the UN inspectors who came later on and were measuring it and examining it. No one had seen this weapon before. Having a little celebration there. Here's the images. The things I had seen them before, I immediately recognised these things because it was a mystery I'd been kind of tracking for a very long time. Here we have video from August 5th. This was another alleged chemical attack on August 5th in Adra, Damascus. And 3 of the same kind of rockets were used. They were, as far as I could tell, they were absolutely identical, apart from the damage that was done to them. It was the same design. So immediately I thought, okay, we not only have a chemical attack on August 21st, but we also seem to have one on August 5th. We didn't know what chemical was used. We didn't know anything about these rockets. Not only that, but I'd seen these in other attacks. So this is Adra, Damascus on June 11th, the same kind of rocket. Daria, Damascus on January 4th, 2013, the start of 2013. December 26, 2012, smoking crater with it in. As far as I could tell, these were all identical to what we were seeing. So we had all these previous examples going back months and months and months. So there's a whole debate about who's responsible, yet we have all this information going back months. I was really interested in what these were, and I was contacted by some activists on the ground, which I generally don't talk to activists on the ground because I kind of think there can be like a feedback loop and they start giving you information you want to hear. But they contacted me and said, hey, do you want to speak to a doctor who's been treating these patients? And I spoke to the doctor. He gave me some interesting information. But I said to them, if you see any of these rockets, can you take pictures of them? What they actually did is dragged one into their house and started taking photographs of them. So they started sending me all these measurements. They said it was perfectly safe because it was on their balcony. But you can see, they're wearing a little plastic bag over their hands. I warned them to be really careful. They say, let's start unscrewing it. I said, don't do that because there could be sarin trapped in it. But they sent me about 57 images, close-up images with measurements of every single part. So over that, I could actually work with Human Rights Watch and put together this diagram of how we reckon the rocket put together. And this was very soon after the attacks. What's really interesting is we were certain this was a liquid-filled chemical weapon. People talk about sarin gas, but sarin is a liquid. So we're thinking, okay, so it could possibly be sarin, but there was still a lot of confusion about what it was. To confuse things further, this video was posted online, or 2 videos were posted online showing a different type. This had yellow powder in the front of it. But what we actually realised is there were actually 2 types of these rockets being used, an explosive type and a chemical type. So one thing we noticed that was a big difference is on the left, all the chemical rockets on August 21st, or most of them, had red numbering on them. All the explosive ones we saw had black numbering on them. So that was the first clue that this was definitely something different because we had all these grainy images and we were trying to piece it all together. Here we have the base of one of the warheads for the chemical type. There's actually 2 ports in the bottom. The one on the right was a mystery for a really long time, but it appears to be actually for the fuse that was used. They put the fuse in the back of the warhead, and it's basically the motion of the impact that detonates it. On the left is actually just a screw plug. So they just unscrewed it, filled it, closed it, shot it at people. You don't actually have the screw plug. This is the explosive version, and you can see the screw plug isn't there. So the warhead is definitely a different design. You can actually see the inside and the outside of the screw plug here. You can actually see the thread of the screw. Supposedly, some of the sound was found inside that screw thread as well. It was removed and sound was inside there. I started getting quite obsessed with the details, so I started looking at all the little details in the tail fins, just to be 100% sure they were the same. So here we had a close-up of one of the chemical ones used in June 2013. So you can see the tail fin is basically put into a slot and welded in. There's these little bolt holes that are also around the edges of it. I believe those are used to hold the rocket into position. They usually have bolts in them. And you can actually see the way the tail fins are configured are basically very consistent. And if you look here, you can see exactly the same kind of configuration. You can see here the bolt is actually in position. It hasn't fallen out. The welding is exactly the same. And this is from the January 2001. This is from the one used on August 21st, exactly the same. This is actually from one of the explosive volcano rockets. Again, it's the exact same design. What I also did, I took images of the tail fins and I basically resized them and laid them side by side to make sure the dimensions of the tail fins were all exactly the same. So on the left, this just looks like coloured bands, but on the left is actually the ring that goes around the outside, and the rest of it's the tail fin. They just take screenshots from the video. So I could lay them side by side and say, okay, they have exactly the same dimensions, even though one of these from January, one of these from June, and one of them was an explosive one from August. I went through and looked at the bolts on them. They had all the same design. So they were identical in every way. But then we came across this video which showed one that appeared to be being loaded into a launcher. And this was filmed by opposition members. They claimed this was the Syrian government. And you can actually see this being loaded at the moment. It's quite a long video. So here you can see they've loaded it into a very large launcher. It's then moved into position and it's then fired. Someone then discovered this picture from November 2012, and this appeared to be another launcher. And in fact, at Meze Air Base, which is government controlled, there was, I think, 6 or 7 videos showing these rockets being launched from the government-controlled airbase in December 2012. So you can see the launches here, and what you can actually see here is one of the trucks that have been used to launch it being driven around. But there was a problem. If you look on the left-hand side, you can see a guy stood next to the tail of one of these rockets. The tail is incredibly long. It's nearly as long as the guy is. And then you've got the warhead on top of it. This thing's huge. The problem is the ones used on August 21st, which is being held up here, the tail was obviously only 1.5 meters long. So what we then realised is there are actually 2 sizes of these rockets, not just 2 types, but 2 sizes. What then started happening in October 2013 is all of a sudden the Syrian government, pro-Syrian government channels started posting videos of them being used. It's like all of a sudden they didn't care that anyone. So these are all videos from pro-government sources. And this is all stuff on social media. I mean, this video here was posted on the Syrian National Defense Force's own YouTube channel and own Facebook pages. It was actually shown on Syrian state television. It seemed in October they'd realised that the threat of chemical attack, responses to the chemical attack had evaporated, so they could feel free about launching it. And this video was very interesting. What we have here is the rocket launch, and in a minute you'll see the actual explosion from the impact. Zoom in, just in the far distance. There, you can just see the flash, and then you count a few seconds, and you can hear the explosion. The thing is, what you can figure out from that, the speed of sound is fairly consistent depending on where you are. If you just count the time between the flash and the sound, you get the range of the rocket. And that turned out to about 2 kilometers in that case. And there's been videos since then showing, the range is around 2+ kilometers. So you can figure out the range of the rockets. And this is important. And I'll come back to that later. But as I said, a lot of these pictures started appearing on social media. This picture on the left is a Hezbollah fighter posing with some of the rocket launchers. On the right, this is another pro-government group launching one of the rockets. In fact, it was so popular it even appeared on pro-Hezbollah propaganda. You can see it just on the top left-hand side. So we could kind of learn so much information about these rockets. So finally, what we learned about these rockets is there were 3 sizes. There was this sort of basic 107mm type. We had a picture of the rockets and a picture of the launcher. We had the 122mm motor type, which was launched from the 2-barrel launcher, and then the 220mm motor type from a single-barrel launcher. This is all information from social media. We found all this stuff out way before reports and it's like the UN report identified these weapons like 4 weeks after they were identified by me on my blog. I mean, this information was just all out there, but no one was looking at it. There's actually another rocket used on August 21st, and this is being measured by UN inspectors when they arrived to look at the remains of these rockets. This looked to me like a standard artillery rocket. It's something that's quite common in the conflict. They come in various sizes, and I wanted to know how big this was. So what I did, I basically took the footage, rotated it around, cut out the tape measure he was using it, and then used it to measure the rocket myself. And I found it was 140mm wide, and there's only a few types of 140mm rockets. I then found reference material for those rockets and started comparing the nozzles of the rockets in the diagrams to what was in the videos. The numbering, you can see maybe on the bottom left, there's a 179. You can see the 179 on the diagram. And from this information, we were able to identify it was an M14 140mm artillery rocket, one of the warheads for which is a sarin warhead. So we had the chemical figured out, we knew what rockets were used, and then kind of this sort of debate about the range of the rockets came into to the throw. This is the map produced by the United States government, basically saying this is how we know the Syrian government was responsible. I have a lot of problems with this map. I mean, look how it's being described. They talk about opposition dominant and regime dominant areas. That really doesn't mean anything when you're looking at something you're talking about a 2 kilometer range. In fact, this is the area here I've marked in red that was actually of most interest from the attack. This is a satellite map image of it. I wanted to know where the front lines were. So I started saying, okay, what videos do we have showing the front lines in those positions? Because this is where the attacks could have come from, but we don't know where anyone is. We don't know where the pro-government forces are. We don't know where the opposition are. Fortunately, there was a Russian language news channel called Anna News, and they spent a couple of months filming something called Operation Al-Kaban, which showed Syrian government forces capturing a large area. This is various footage. I mean, it's really unique footage. They mount cameras on top of tanks. These videos are like 10 minutes long. There's like 24 of them over a period of months. So I started going through each video and plotting out every single one. So this is, just figuring out, this is from the June 27th video. I say, okay, the soldiers were here. They were clearing this building. And in some videos, you have stuff like this, where it's quite hard to see, what's going on. You see these guys, they're in a BMP, they're looking out the porthole of the window. You can't really see much. But this actually gives you a street view level of what's going on. So again, I looked at this and I started mapping out, started saying, okay, what can I actually see in this video? And I'd seen other videos where you could actually see, I'd mapped out other videos and you could say, okay, this garage door has this painting on it. This gate is here. So when these guys are in these vehicles looking out of them, you could actually see them along the road. So you start mapping where they, what you can see. So for example, this is me mapping, building by building, what you can see. So for example, here he's looking through the porthole. On the right, this is the same view when he's looking out of the, they're filming from the top of a building near it. So here's another example where there's a gate that they've actually pulled down in this earlier video. You can actually see the gate on the floor. You can see the windows on the left matched with the windows on the right, the round circle of the gates on the floor. So you can actually map out the route they take, and it gives you a kind of street view look of what's there for further checking further videos. So basically, I could figure out all the various camera positions. So this is just an example of some of the camera positions I figured out, because you can say, okay, these guys are on this rooftop. It's obviously not the heart of military activity if they can sit on a rooftop filming. You can see where they were fighting. You can see later on they actually moved up and they found a new position on top of a building. And from that, I started getting an idea of exactly where the Syrian military government were fighting, what they had captured, how they were spreading through this area. On the opposition side, we had videos like this. These videos were posted over a period of about a month, just before and after August 21st. It shows them attacking the same checkpoint. Just keep an eye on the bridge, you'll see it coming up in each video. This is the same location being attacked again and again, but it's like one, every week they'll fire a mortar shell or two at it. It's very low intensity. So here, these are clips of each one. So the videos are filmed from about the same position. And you want to say, okay, we can see this bridge, but where is it? We have no idea where this is. So what is in the area? So there's 3 mosques that you can see. I've circled them there so that you start with the mosques. You can also see this very interesting mountain range in the background. So what you can do with Google Earth, if you go into Google Earth, you have a whole 3D map of the world. If you go to, I had a few ideas where it could be. So I got the cursor on Google Earth, put it on the ground, and got the ground view, and you get the topography of all the mountain ranges. So here, you can actually see that this exact same mountain range in the view from Google Earth on top, from the view in the video from below. So that confirmed I was looking in the right direction. But then what about the rest of it? So this is the area I was looking at. This was kind of ring roads, quite a busy area. But I wanted to find those mosques then. So I started looking northwards and marking out all the mosques. So I was actually able to find each mosque and mark it in a row pointing northwards. And on the left you can see the mosques, and then on the right you can see the rows. And far in the background, you can see on the bottom left-hand corner, there's a huge structure. And if you look on the satellite map imagery, you can see it really clear. It's a massive military hospital. And you can actually match the details on the building to what's actually on the video. So it became quite clear that there was a checkpoint in the area to the north marked underpass. I also found information about one called the electricity station, Tommy checkpoint. I found information about all these checkpoints. So based off the Anna News video and off the checkpoints, I could draw out this map of basically the government control on August 21st. So this is the area they controlled. So that doesn't mean much without knowing the range of the rockets, but we've actually already found out what the range of the rockets are. So we know the range of the rockets, we know the location that the government controlled. But where did the rockets land? How can we be sure of that? So I then went back and started using this techniques I'd used before to verify locations of rockets. So here basically what I'm doing is I'm looking at satellite map imagery, I'm looking at buildings that are visible, and I'm finding, okay, you know, this is the view north in this photograph. Here we have the view to the south. Here we've got the view to the east. And again, it's looking at, you know, going back to what I was showing in Bergen, TG, and Rabbit, it's looking for buildings that match to what's on satellite map imagery, seeing all these different points of information. And here we've got one to the west. So I had a view of this. This is one rocket. I had a view to the north, the east, the south, and the west. I had the whole area. So from that, I found 5 impact locations of rockets. What you have here, the bottom right-hand corner, the rocket locations, I found those to the meter. Those are accurate to the meter. I then put 2 rings around them. The red rings is the 2-kilometer range, which is sort of the minimum estimated range. The green rings are the 2.5 kilometer, which is sort of the generally agreed by most people, the longest range of the rockets. So you can see that actually falls very neatly into the area controlled by the government on August 21st. After I'd been doing all this work, I actually came across this map that had been posted 2 weeks after the attacks. Someone had done a map of what the opposition controlled. And if you actually look at this, it's actually the exact opposite of what I've done. Basically, they've marked all the areas the opposition controlled, and if you actually fit my map onto that, it actually fits very neatly into the space left for the government. So what's really interesting about this, if you then look at the map provided by the US government, if you look at the area that's circled in red, the actual area that I marked is actually completely unmarked. It's the sort of top left corner of that box. They haven't put anything there. It's just blank. So the United States government, when they were saying we need to attack, you know, Syria and, you know, for this chemical weapons attack, they didn't even know what was going on there. But that just shows that from using this open source information, you get very detailed information on the ground that's very relevant to attacks like the Sarin attack in Damascus on August 21st. So just to end, if you want to know more about that stuff, on July 14th, I'm going to be launching a new website called Bellingcat. It's basically going to be lots of how-to guides, information about how to do this kind of investigation. So if you want to find out more, in a week's time, you can go and visit there and find all kinds of different case studies and information about that sort of thing. Thank you.